Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Saturday morning live stream. Today we have a fun topic to go over. We are going to discuss probes and we're going to discuss the different modules that Neptune system makes. Specifically, we're going to go into all of the modules, what they do, how they work with each other, how to hook them up, how to get everything going on your system that I get a lot of questions about. So we're going to go over each one. We're going to go over each probe, how to set up each probe, and so forth. And as some of you know, we are going to also be giving away something today. And I will show you what I have. As people like to know that I have it in front of me. So I'm going to be giving away an Osmolator 3152, which is more geared for the smaller tanks, but you can use this up to a 100-gallon tank with probably no problem. It's powerful enough to do it. So I'm going to be giving away that, and I'm going to be giving away two flipper magnets. I have a nano and kind of like a medium size magnet here. All three of these have been used, but they all are in good shape and they're free. So again, that's what I'll be giving away today. Hello, Rogue Aquariums. Hello, Producer Reef. Hello, Brian. And again, in order to be entered into the contest or the giveaway, there are some rules. You must ask a question, and you must say, I love Reef Automation in the chat. And Vinny D, welcome. You have to make sure you spell automation correctly, or I can't give it away because that's how I'm going to put your names in the pot. So if you notice, Ryan's automation is highlighted in orange. I don't know if it is on your side, but it helps me to know who entered the contest. What's up, Myers Reef? And Siraj, there he is again, trying to get free stuff. Siraj, how you liking that Versa? Have you got it hooked up yet from last week? Vinny's driving. Okay. So give me a second. I will get this going here. I'm using two different screens here to do this, so you'll just have to bear with me. One of my screens wasn't working this morning. So again, the topic today is going to be modules specifically. I have a lot of people that ask me quite a bit, what module do I need to do this? What module do I need to do this? And most of the time, the answers are pretty easy when you see the products and how they all work. So we're going to go over that today. We're going to go over how to use the probes, how to calibrate the probes, the right way to calibrate probes, and the right way and the right place to put the probes. So let's see. Myers Reef, I don't know. I will show you. This one is the says for use in glass or acrylic up to 1/2 inch for the one of them. And then the other one's the little mini one. And let's see what it says on here. I don't know. This is the little nano one. Up to 6 millimeters or 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch. Sorry. 12 millimeters on the other one. These things are pretty strong, so you can give them a try. All right. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I try to wear a different shirt every stream. I got a lot of shirts from different shows I go to. I got a couple Neptune shirts. I got a special Control Freak shirt that Terrence gave me. So try to wear different shirts. Let's see. If you have an Apex, you want to use Apex ATK, way better. Yeah, so the ATK over the tones, ATO was the question. Let's see. It's a good question. I think the Tunze ATO is fantastic. I think the Apex ATK is also fantastic. Um, my recommendation to you, Timothy, is if you have an Apex, get the ATK. If you don't have an Apex or you are just doing limited things on the Apex, I would get a Tunze. I think the Tunze ATO is fantastic for systems that are not Apex driven. Because the ATK, you could do all kinds of things with it. So I think that would be my recommendation for you on that. I would stick with if you have an Apex, get an ATK. If you don't have an Apex, get a Tunze ATO. I think Tunze makes the best ATO, the Osmolator. If you've never had one or seen it in action, I've had about 6 or 7 of them over the years in different tanks. They never have any problems. They never fail. They seem to work, and you can hook them up to your RO system. You can hook them up with special solenoids so they turn on at certain times. I've done all kinds of crazy things with the Tunze Osmolator. Um, so again, to be entered into the contest, you have to ask a question about automation. I do that because I want people to be involved that are winning the giveaways. I don't think it's fair to the others who stay for the entire stream and don't participate. So if you want to be part of the contest, you must ask a automation question. So, Rogue, how often should you replace your probes? We're going to go over that. We're going to go over all the probes, all the different probes, and how they hook up. So I'll explain that to you. Um, yep, the 3155 is the big boy of the osmolator. Men, again, remember I'm giving away the 3152, which is the smaller one, but there is a setting inside here that you can adjust if you have a tank above 50 gallons. I have had this working on a 100-gallon tank without problems. The biggest difference between this one and the one that Rogue mentioned is this only has a single sensor. So if you see on above here, it has this one sensor, whereas the 3155 has 2 sensors. So it has a little bit better redundancy. But it has the same pump as the 3155 and the same power as the 3155. So it can pretty much do, I would say, up to 100 gallons without a problem. Um, let's see. I'd like to know probe placement. Yep, we'll go over that. Carl, good to see you, buddy. Welcome to the chat. And Timothy, again, welcome to the chat as well. I like seeing new people, new faces. And Siraj did the update set up yesterday. Terrific. Did you get the pump going? Did you get the pump moving? They're pretty cool. I really like the verses. Let's see. What else we got here? All right, so we'll get started. Looks like we got 12 people in here. Again, in order for you guys to be entered in the contest, we have to have more than 10 people. And again, you have to ask a question to be entered into the contest. And I know I say that I'll only ship to the United States. I'm going to rephrase that with I will ship anywhere. However, you will have to pay for it if it's not in the United States. So I have no problem giving away free stuff, but I can't afford to ship to Germany, for instance. So let's see. If I have an EB8, would I need to add a couple of Neptune solenoids? If I have an EB8, would I need to add a couple Neptune solenoids? Vinny, I'm not sure how to answer that question. The solenoids do something completely different than the EB8. The solenoids are for quarter-inch tubing to kill the water, and you can kill actually the gas, so you could actually use it for CO2, for instance, to kill the gas going into a calcium reactor with a solenoid. So I'm not sure how to answer that question, but EB8s are for 120 volt power devices, and solenoids are for quarter-inch tubing, which we'll go over. Like I said, today is going to be more of just a product information type stream. I'm not going to really go into any programming unless someone specifically asks me to show them how to program something. We're going to go over basically the different nuts and bolts of Apex and how and what they sell. They're powered by 24 volt. EB8 do not have. That is correct. The EB8s do not have 24 volt DC, so you're going to need something else, which again we will go over specifically what you will need to do something like that. All right, so let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to go over is the Apex processors and the different ones that they make. As of now, I still see some classics rolling around there. I still see some Apex Juniors rolling around there. So you can still pretty much add any of the modules I go over, with the exception of a couple of them, which I will go over, to the Classic and the Apex Junior. For those that aren't aware, the Apex Junior was a Apex brain that had 4 outlets built into the brain. However, it could only control up to 4 modules, so you couldn't add anything but 4 modules to the Apex Junior. The Apex Classic, I believe, has also a maximum amount. I don't remember how much it is, but I believe it is between 12 and 20 modules. The new ones, however, can do up to 38 modules safely. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the different Apex modules. So we're going to go over the difference between the Apex current one and the Apex EL, which is what I'm going to go over right now. So the Apex standard model, or the let's call it the flagship model, is going to look like this. It's going to have the auxiliary power, it's going to have the temp, the salinity, it's going to have 2 pH ORP probes, which we'll go over in a second. It's going to have your standard Ethernet Aquabus and the I/O. It's also going to have the VDM ports. So the difference between the two, and I will show you right now, is the EL does not have salinity. It doesn't have the additional pH input, and it does not have the VDMs. So if we go look at these, you can see the difference between the two. So the EL does not have the VDM ports, which we'll go over what those are, and it does not have the additional pH ORP, and it does not have the salinity. So that is the difference between the two. Other than that, they work exactly the same. And what I mean by that is you can add anything you want to either one of these, up to 38 modules. Producer, I hope that answers your question. Suraj, can the Apex still turn on and off using water sensor? Can the Apex still turn it on and off using water sensor? Yes. So what Suraj was saying is they make 120 volt solenoids. There's a company called Auto Top Off, and I will put this in the notes as well. Autotopoff.com is a great website for anything auto top offs. This guy sells everything. He sells ATO controllers, he sells float switches, he sells pumps. All of these you can be plugged into the Apex. Specifically the solenoid valves, which you just went over, Vinny, is you could actually get a solenoid valve that is powered by 120. And he's got a couple different ones. He's got 1/4 normally opens. He's got 1/4 normally closed. He's got all kinds of different ones. And again, these would plug into your EB8 to turn on and off. And I actually use one of these as a safety for my RO system. At my water line coming into my RO system, I bought one of these normally, trying to remember if it's a normally closed 1/4, this guy. And I bought it so in case, let's say I have a leak or something happens, it kills the water source right away. Loses power, kills the water source. So this again, let's see if I can click on it, is a 120 volt solenoid. So you plug this guy right into your EB8 and you can kill whatever whatever it is. It could be gas, it could be water, it could be whatever. And again, he sells a normally closed. And what that means is when it does not have power, it's closed, and when it has power, it's open. He also sells a normally open one, which I don't recommend in most situations. You normally want you generally want a normally closed one. So I hope, Vinny, that helps you. Um, if you have a one-link cable plugged into your EB8, run it to your Trident and then run an Aquabus cable to Trident, a PMOne module. Will that work? So the one-link cable, which we're going to go over, I'm going to go over that kind of in detail, is specifically what it says, one link, meaning one cable. If you are plugging anything into one link, you do not need power and you do not need Aquabus. You strictly only need the one-link cable. So hopefully that helps. And again, I will type it here. It is autotopoff.com. These guys sell all kinds of stuff. They sell wiring, they sell tubing, they sell fittings, they sell mounting brackets. I don't know specifically who this is, but I know that I've bought a lot of stuff from him. So again, the difference between the two Apexes are, as I said, the pH, and again, the ORP and pH are both. Now, what that means is you can plug an ORP or a pH probe into either one of these, and you can assign them to be ORP or pH depending on your situation. And then, of course, the I/O box, which we'll go over. Previous streams, I went over what the I/O box does. But basically, what the switch inputs are is you can go online. There's tons of companies that sell switch boxes, buttons, all kinds of crazy stuff that you can plug into the 6 switch. I would say the biggest thing that you get with the Apex is the salinity. I don't think many people use the VDMs or the 0 to 10s, and not many people use ORP. So I think to answer Producer Reef's question, if you were to get just an EL, my recommendation is maybe to get a salinity module. But the rest of this really isn't as important. And again, it's dependent upon your system. I don't use the VDM modules for anything but one thing, and that's for moonlight dimming. So I don't see why it would be a point of getting this unless you want everything built into one system. In terms of price, it's going to be the same price. If you get a salinity probe and you get a salinity module, it's going to be the same price as a standard Apex anyways. The one-link cable is not a USB, Carl. It is a special cable, which we're going to go over. And again, the one-link cable is in its name. It does power, control, all in one cable. So you do not use the Aquabus, and you do not use power on it. I think he wants to know if you can run Aquabus from the Trident to power something else. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if you plug the one link into a Trident, you can then use the USB on it to plug into something else, because the one link is the control wire. It doesn't require the USB at that point. Apex planning RP ozone. Okay, so that's the difference between the two Apex controllers. I'm sure everyone knows what the Trident is, but we're just going to show you what the Trident is, how to hook it up real quick. I'm trying to remember if they have a picture of the back of it. I don't think they do on here. I like to see pictures of things to know what it is. So the Trident has a power, it has a USB, and it has a one link. So to answer the question that we had earlier, the Trident can be hooked up either via the one link or it can be hooked up via the USB and the power. Anytime you hook up the USB Aquabus, you must have power plugged into the Trident. Otherwise, it won't get power. So Trident can only be used on the newer Apex. It cannot be used on the Classic. So if you have a Classic or a Junior, the Trident will not work with it. Next one is the IntelliPump, or their pumps. So they have two different pumps. They have the 20 and the 15. The 15 is going to be the the less power pump. They are the same form factor. They look exactly the same. They have the same sizing and everything. So if you get the Core 10, or I'm sorry, the Core 15, you could swap it with the 20 and vice versa down the road. The biggest difference between the 20 and the 10 is what the control is. So on the 20, you have an aqua bus and you have power. Now, this unit by itself can be a pump without Apex. So if you go out and get a Core 20, you don't need an Apex to have this thing run. It'll just run like a normal pump, and you can control the power from the front of it. From these two little buttons up here, you can control it. So that's the Core 20. Now the Core 15 does require an Apex. You have to have an Apex. You also have to have a one link in order to use the Core 15. So most people ask me, okay, why would you do one or the other? I would say that they're both very good pumps, but I think the Core 20 has a little more functionality in most tanks because you don't need to run the one link cable. Let me see, they don't have a picture of it. But basically, the Core 15 only has a one link on the bottom. So it has to be hooked up with a one link, which means you must have a one link box or you must have a Energy Bar 832 that has the one links on the side. So just keep that in mind if you ever are looking at core pumps. Again, Core 20 can be a pump by itself, just like any other return pump. The Core 15, you must have an Apex and you must have a one link. You also must have a Apex brain, for instance, in order for this to work. So you can't just plug this into one link and then use it. You have to have an Apex system. Yeah, so Brian, that's a great comment you made. The Trident, maybe one day I'll do a stream just on the Trident, but the Trident, if you ever need to do anything with it, you must unplug it a specific way. You have to go to shut down it during through the Apex system configuration, and then unplug it, and then move it, plug it back in. My recommendation is anytime you reboot the Trident to prime all the lines, to prime A, B, and C, and the sample line all over again. So that's the core. Those are the core pumps. The LDK. You don't see people use this very often. So the LDK it's basically an FMM with a leak sensor. That's basically all it is. It comes with two. I think it's better to just buy an FMM and get the leak sensors you want, the sensors you want for it separately. I don't know if the cost savings is worth it. I think it's like $10. But the LDK is the leak detection kit, and it comes with two leak sensors, and it comes with an FMM, which we'll go over FMMs. The next one is the dose, which most of you guys already know. The dose, just like the Trident, has a one link, has an aqua bus and power. And again, if you're using the one link, that's all you have to plug into the dose. You don't have to plug anything else in but the one link, and that'll do everything you need. We're not going to go through specifically the dose and how it all works. Okay, so the ATK is a little different than the leak detection kit, and I'll explain it a little bit. The ATK comes with an FMM. However, it comes with your pump and your sensors and everything you need to have an automatic top-off system, all inclusive by itself. And one key thing to know about the ATK is it does not need an Apex to work. You can buy this just as a standalone ATK kit, and it will work like an auto top-off right out of the box. You do not need an Apex with it. However, it does come with an FMM, so you can do all the cool things that FMM does with it if you have an Apex. Okay, Siraj, I would definitely not switch to the PM to do this. The liter meter, which is what I use, is those pumps are significantly stronger than the PM. I've done tests in my own house. The PM, They say we'll get up to 14 feet, but I can tell you right now, in a house that's 10 foot tall ceilings, I've tried the PM from the bottom of the ground to to my ceiling, and it's just weak, right at about 10 feet. So if you're trying to get that thing to travel, the liter meter is your best bet. The other thing about the liter meter is they're peristaltic pumps. So what that means is they will cut the water, and you won't have any of the siphoning going on either side. So when you have a PMP and you're trying to travel 10 feet up, um, it does come with a siphon in the kit, but that water will just all go right back into the container. So the liter meter will keep it right where it is, and you don't have to worry about the water going and back feeding back into the container. So I would continue to use the liter meter if it was me. Um, Timothy, the dose is fantastic. It's a little loud. A lot of people get that. Get people. I'm sorry. Get upset with the amount of noise it makes. So if you compare that to, like you said, the BRS doser down there, the noise is quite. How do I explain it? Depends on the speed that you're going with the dose, but it's kind of noisy, especially if you're doing a lot of dosing during the day. But other than that, it's fantastic. I mean, I keep my doses in cabinets, so I don't ever hear them. But they're fantastic and they're easy to program. Breakup we're using the market flow sensors, hopefully for the flow module. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, Carl, but yeah, the breakout boxes are great for input and outputs, but the breakout box does not do a flow sensor, or at least it doesn't tell you what the flow is. You would need an actual flow sensor. Um, okay, we're going to go through the FMK now. So it's interesting. That's the flow sensors. So again, the FMK kit is what I purchased, which is an FMM again, and it comes with um, three flow sensors, which are awesome. You could do a flow sensor for your return. You could do your flow sensor for, I don't know. I used one of mine for an algae turf scrubber. You can use one for a UV sterilizer. So FMK again is another FMM that comes with different parts. And my suggestion to you is, if you're strictly doing flow sensoring with an FMM, then get the FMK kit. If you're strictly doing an auto top off, get the ATK kit. But in my situation, I bought all the parts separately because I found that they're so versatile that if you just buy the FMM and buy all the different pieces, you can actually save some money depending on how you're configuring it. So that's the FMK. Next one's the Wave. So this is their pump. Something to know about the Wave is, just like the Core 15, you must have this plugged into a one link. So you must have this working with a one link box or a EB 832 in order to use the Wave. I have purchased a Wave, and I can tell you it is extremely powerful. Um, Extremely powerful. I put it in a 100-gallon tank, and it was too much for the 100-gallon tank. Um, I have MP40s on my 100, and I have them on both sides. If I had two waves on this tank, I would probably have to set them to about 5% if I wanted them to work. So, not to say they're not good pumps. I think they're fantastic pumps. I think they're really good at what they do. But just note that they are very powerful. And I have asked multiple times to Apex to make a nano version or smaller versions of their wave pump, because it's just too powerful for most people's basic tanks that they're trying to use these. Um, let's see, can the wave, I'm assuming the wave work on the three? Absolutely. The magnet on this thing is really powerful. I think you could do up to an inch with no problem. Yep, magnetic works up to an inch. So yeah, I use that. I've used it on 3/4 with no problem. Yeah, so Corwin, I believe that's a good point. Um, the wave does not work without a one link, which means if the one link goes out, the wave pump goes out. Now you can of course put the one link cable on a battery backup, so you could put the one link into the one link box, which then is on a battery backup. So that way, if the Apex was to have any issues, this will go into a fallback statement or fallback mode, which you can program, which means it'll still run on a battery backup if and only if the one link has power, has 120 power. Let's see. I personally love the wave pumps. No more power supplies. We don't know. It's magnets waterproof. That's a good question, Vinny. I just put a an innovative marine pump into my Nano, and they said that the magnet is not waterproof. I have that in the water, and I've had it in the water for months, and I haven't seen any problems. So I don't have the answer for you on that question, but most magnets that have a plastic covering seem to do just fine in salt water, especially if you have a lot of flow passing through them. I've never had a problem with that. Wave pumps are too powerful. Yep. Like I said, wave pumps are really powerful. Uh, Yep, they said it was. Yep, okay. Like I said, most power head magnets are waterproof. If they're surrounded by a nice plastic coating, I haven't really ever seen an issue with putting those in the water. All right, next one is the Reservoir. Now, as all of you know, I am a big Apex guy. I love all of Apex's products. I don't usually give any negative connotation to Apex products, except for this product. So my problem with this product, this is their reservoir for their dose. The nice thing about this unit is it does have the built-in optical sensors. You plug this directly into your dose and you get readings of the amount of fluid that's left, and you also get readings if something was to go bad. The problem with the dose is that if you ever need to replace a specific a specific liquid in, let's say, the right side, you have to dump out the entire thing because these things are attached. You can't detach them, they are glued in there. So if you ever needed to, let's say this was alk calcium, and you decided you're going to get rid of calcium and you're going to put mag, well, you're going to have to remove all the liquid from this thing because otherwise it's almost impossible to get the liquid just out of one of these things unless you run the dose for a couple, I would say, hours to get all the liquid out of here. So that's my only concern. Anytime I'm doing dosing, I like to have separate containers so that way I can swap them to whatever I want. And since we're talking about containers, let me show you guys a couple of things that I do. So my favorite company for dosing containers is Trigger Systems, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen before. Trigger Systems makes some different dosing containers, and they're really nice. They're not crazy cheap. They're probably like $50 for the cheapest one, but they're nice little containers. I have a ton of these. And what I love about them is they're very basic, they're very small, and you can swap them with anything. Now, let me show you something else. And I'm sure Neptune wouldn't like me showing you this, but I'm going to show you it anyways. If you go on eBay and you look for dose optical sensors, take a look at this. There's a guy, and I've actually spoke to him, that makes optical sensors, and I have them, I use them, to be plugged into your dose. So this basically replaces this, and you can use your own sensors. So this is what I do because I really like the ability to use my own containers and also have the same ability that the DDR shows me. When you plug this sucker into your dose, you get the amount of liquid left, you get the optical sensing as well. So it's basically replacing the DDR by using your own containers. So again, this guy sells them for $45. The DDR I think is $200, so you're already saving your money by using your own containers. So I'm not a fan of the DDR in general. That's the only product I would say that Apex or Neptune makes that I don't really like. I wish they had the ability to split these. I wish they had the ability to, um, take the top off, for instance, just to clean them. That's another real hassle if you ever have to clean these guys. Um, they're not too big. But like I said, if you're using these trigger systems, they're much smaller, and you can fit a lot. You could fit like 5 of them next to each other really easily. So that's the DDR. We're not going to go through much more on that. Okay, next one is the AFS, which is the feeder. I had mixed reviews on the feeder. I like the feeder. I use it on all of my tanks. Um, there's really not much to say about the feeder. My feeders, after I don't know 3 or 4 years, are starting to get really loud. You can definitely hear these things when they come on. So just be aware that these are loud. They work really well. I use just pellets. I feed my 300-gallon fish-only tank with 2 AFSs on both sides, and I've had them for since they were made. So I think I had the first batch of them when they first came out. So I really like the AFS. So if anybody ever is interested in getting them, they do need an Aquabus cable to be powered, and that's it. Just like any module, there's nothing more to it. All right. The PMK. Okay, so uh, I think the PMK is another device that I would not recommend to people. The concept is quite good. If you buy a PMK system, you can get the power readings, and it works very well. The problem with the PMK is the assumption that Neptune is making is that you're going to put this little sensor inside a rock somewhere, and you're going to get monitoring at that one location. Now, I'm sure all of you have figured out that why would you do that? Why would you need a power meter at one point of your tank? I just don't see the point of that. The other thing that they kind of sell you on with this unit is that it'll tell you if your lights are on too bright accidentally somehow. Uh, I don't know. Maybe you guys can tell me. I would say in my 15 plus, I don't know how many years I've been doing reefing, I've never had a light all of a sudden just go to 100% on its own. Um, it just doesn't happen. And if it does, usually I'm home, and usually if it's 100% for more than 6, 7 hours, corals are going to be fine. So I don't know. I don't and this thing's really expensive, by the way. So I don't know. I'm gonna say this is a 50-50 for me on whether or not I like it or not. So these are all the kits they sell. So we'll go over the energy bars. So they still sell the old energy bars, which are really cool. I like the 6. I'm sorry, the 4 and the 8. The 6 is for if you're doing 240s. It's usually for international inputs. There's not a lot of devices that are 240, so so these will work with any Apex Classic, new ones. It's just an energy bar with outlets. What's nice about these energy bars is they have 6 Aquabus cables on the bottom. So you could plug up to 6 things into this thing, which is pretty phenomenal. If you compare that to the new one, the EB832, it only has 3 Aquabus cables. So for the price, this thing is half the price of the 832. But what you're missing is the following. You're missing the one link, you're missing the 24-volt ability, and you're also missing the power monitoring. So what's nice about the EB832 is you can actually get power monitoring per outlet, whereas in Energy Bar 8, you get power monitoring for the entire system. So that's the biggest difference. One thing to note is you'll see there's 2 outlets on the outside and then the 6 outlets on the inside. The 2 outlets on the outside are relay controlled, and they control, I believe, up to 10 amps, whereas the ones inside are 5 amps and they are not relay controlled. So what that means is I recommend if you're ever using an EB8 or even an Energy Bar 4, which I believe one of the outlets is it's rated at 12 amps, use that for a chiller. Use that for something that is a power hog. So always use the outside outlets for anything that has a lot of power. Not necessarily a heater, but like a chiller. Trying to think what else you'd put on there. Definitely don't put a solenoid on those, like a CO2 solenoid, because again, they're relays. So your CO2 solenoid is going to be going off and on a lot. That relay will break over time, no doubt. So if you're using solenoids, use the first 6. If you're using large power devices, use the larger amperage relays. And remember, use those for things that do not turn off and on constantly. Yeah, Vinny, that's a good point. Maybe other people can chime in. I don't think I've seen a T5 change its PAR over time. It usually changes its spectrum over time. So, like another person said, it does not use the blue spectrum, so you would never know if it's even working. But generally, and I use T5s, generally T5s do not change their PAR by very much over time. Now, maybe after 3 or 4 years, yeah, they'll probably just die on you. But generally, T5s change spectrum, not PAR. So again, that's my opinion on that. And I'm not a T5 expert, but I don't know if the PAR meter would actually tell you when your T5s are going bad. I just change them every 12 months, every year, basically, and I never have a problem. Okay, next one is the VXM. VXM is awesome. I have 2 of them. The VXM will only control Ecotech Marine MP series and currently the Radeon Generation 1 through 4. It is unknown right now if it will control the new Generation 5. So, I love the WXM. The WXM controls my Radeons and controls all my MP40s in my system. I would say that the WXM is a must if you have Vortec pumps. You plug this baby into USB and you have full control of your MP40s. And there was a person last week that asked me, well, what if you have a battery backup on your MP40s and your system goes out? Or I'm sorry, it was if you put it on feed mode, the power heads still keep going. Well, that's what's so great about a WXM. If you have a WXM and you put it on a feed mode, you can kill the pump to 0% during the feed mode. So I highly recommend the WXM if you have MP40s, MP60s, MP10s. It works on all 3 of those. And again, Radeons 1 through 4. Does not work with Vectra pumps, does not work with the Versa, but for anything else, this thing is a fantastic piece of equipment. I have 2 of them and I love them. Okay, we went over the FMM. The FMM is fantastic. Another device that I probably have 7 of them. I love them. So the 1 through 4 ports can be used for, as you can see, optical sensing, flow sensing, optical sensors, water sensors. All 4 of these can be used for any one of these. Now, what's also nice about this is it has a 24 volt power here. So as long as you plug the 24 volt power into the right side, you can use the accessory port to power solenoids, to power anything that's 24 volt. I mean, I've had this thing power all kinds of different off-brand 24 volt devices. So again, if you use the FMM, you must have power on the right side here, and then you can use the accessory, and it's just like another outlet on the system. So that's the FMM. I'm kind of going to start going a little faster because we're at about 45 minutes here. The pump we went over earlier, a pump is a 24 volt. It plugs into the FMM, plugs into an EB8. It's a pump. not much to the pump. VDM. So this is the VDM. Basically, this is for people that don't have an Apex. They have the Apex EL, and they want to add VDM port. A VDM is a 1 to 10 volt voltage output. So it works typically with LEDs, and you can dim an LED through the VDM port. That's generally what a VDM port is used for. There are also multiple pumps. The Varios pump by Reef Octopus, Abyss pumps. There's a couple other ones, and the VDM port will control the speed at which that pump goes. So that's what VDMs are for. You'll see there's a serial plug in here. That's for older model lighting. Some of the older model lighting had this is called RS-232 right here, or DB9. And this plug right here, they used to plug this into older equipment to control them. So that's what the VDM does. Okay, the PMOne. So the PMOne is, again, a pH or an ORP control. And you also get with the PMOne additional breakout box, as you can see right here. It also has a temperature as well. So this is nice because I have a PMOne on my Nano. This is nice if you have two tanks, for instance. You can plug this in another room somewhere and get your temperature and your pH from that other tank. So the PMOne is a great little piece of equipment. And I will tell all of you that I have a PMOne that I'm going to be giving away. Not today, but at some point I have a PMOne to give away. So the PMOne will have your temperature and your pH all in one right there. PM2 is, again, very similar to PM1, but you add the salinity to it. So now you can have salinity, multiple tanks. If you don't have the Apex main unit and you want to use salinity on a different tank, for instance, the PM1 would be your best bet. The VDM outputs are the same as the base unit, Brett, as the one that I just showed you. They're identical. Dissolved oxygen. Okay. Here's a device that I'll never see. I don't think I've ever seen someone with a PM3. For those that don't know about the PM3, we're going to go over to Bulk Reef Supply, and I'm going to look up how much the PM3 dissolved oxygen probe costs. So for those that know how much it costs in the chat, let me know what you think the dissolved oxygen probe for the PM3 costs. And then we will decide if it's something that you would need in a tank. I'm working too hard. Take a break, Vinny? Yeah. Producer Reef, that was a good guess. $300? Any other guesses? How much the dissolved oxygen costs? Jessica, that's a really. I think you're right on. All right. Let's look how much this thing costs. Just to give you an idea how much this thing costs. There is the lab grade dissolved oxygen probe for the PM3. That's correct. It is $700. So, is it worth it? Absolutely not. So the PM3 does dissolved oxygen. Is it important to know the dissolved oxygen in a tank? I will tell you that it is important to know only if you have a problem. I will give you an example. You go away for a week and your power goes out, or I'm sorry, your pumps go out. This will tell you that you are losing oxygen in the tank. But for the price, I think it's completely unnecessary to get a dissolved oxygen device. Jessica, you don't win anything. Sorry. By the way, Jessica, I don't even think you're entered into our contest because you haven't said the magic word. So, sorry. Anyway, don't get the PM3. it's just I don't think it's worth it for the price. That's just my opinion. Okay, the LSM. Another interesting device. It's a moonlight basically. But again, if you have VDM ports and you have a nice LED light, the LSM kind of is unnecessary. But if you want to do moonlights on the tank and you don't have an LED that's very efficient at making moonlights, or you want to add to the LED, then you get an LSM. I don't know many people that have an LSM. We're not going to really go over this, but this is Neptune's own pellets. They're very good pellets. I've used them before. They work really well with their AFS, which is why they developed them. They don't clump up like some of the other pellets that you try to put into the auto feeder. So I really like them. Oh, sorry. Oh, my computer is acting up. All right, FMM. All right, FMM, we're going to go through this really quickly. Flow sensors, they make a number of different flow sensors for the FMM. They make optical sensors, leak sensors. Here's the solenoid I think Carl was asking about. This is if you want to kill water or gas going into a certain place, you would use the solenoid valve. Again, anytime you use a solenoid or a PMP using an FMM, you must have a power supply plugged into that or it will not work. All right, next one is cables, and this hopefully will answer Carl's question earlier. We're going to go over the different cables real quick. So the Aquabus, they come in all different sizes. They come in all different lengths. You can actually extend that Aquabus. They say 200 feet here. I would say that's pretty accurate. I got mine at 120 feet with no problem. So there's your Aquabus one link. This is what the one link cable looks like. Again, the one link cable does everything. So it does your power, does your control. So if you're using a one link, you do not need to use USB, and you do not need to use power. These are just bare wires if you were to plug something in that is a 24 volt that's not Neptune, like I was talking about earlier. All right, we got the Tunze, they got the dimming channel cables, and we got the advanced dimming for the older lights, like the AI Souls, for instance. So these are all the different cables that they sell. You can make your own cables if you're pretty well versed with cabling. Let's see. Got a question here about advantage to running moonlights. I will tell you that I've run moonlights my entire reefing experience. I like the fact that at night I can see my tank. There's a number of people out there that say blackout. I would really, I like seeing moonlights. I haven't seen any issue with them. Just make them really low. You got to remember, out in nature, there are very throughout the entire year in the ocean, how many times does the moon actually shine onto the corals? It's not as often as you might think. You know, clouding, you got weather, you got all kinds of stuff. I think moonlights are not necessary, and they're more an aesthetic piece of equipment. So I like having moonlights. So I would say keep your moonlights if you have them. Thank you, Aaron, for that wonderful comment. I'm sure that'll help everybody here in the chat. Um, let's see. All right, so we're going to go over the probes now. Before we go on with the probes, you're a piece of equipment. Okay, so any questions on anything that Apex Neptune sells? Any questions on any of the modules that I went over? Again, all of the modules I showed you, with the exception of the Trident and the core, you can use on any Apex. So if you're ever wondering what you can and cannot use, the Classic will not support the core, and it will not support the Trident. Right, let's see. Any questions? I'm looking through the chat here. Let's see if anybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, Timothy. I haven't. Let's see. Yeah, Aaron, you don't have a classic because you have a friend here that gave you a new one. Let's see. Any questions came out? I didn't answer. So everybody that's entered the contest, um, have you asked a automation question? More questions the better because I can't talk forever, unfortunately. Classic won't support the core even with the one link. Timothy, I don't believe it will. I have not tried it. Um, I don't believe it will, but it will support the core the core 20. I don't think it'll do the core 15. Missed my question on the EBIS, or do I need a WXM I could plug in directly to my Apex brain? Abyss is not Ecotech. The WXM only works with Ecotech devices. Am I doing any beta tests for new Apex gear? Vinny, if I was doing a beta test, I could not tell you. Aaron, you are not entered in the contest because you did not say the magic word and you are making fun of me. Just so you know. Okay, pinout connections, Brett, are very simple. If you're familiar with contact closures, it's just two wires that come together and disconnect. That's what a relay is, or that's what a contact is on the bob. It's just a connection. It's just like if you had two wires, you cut them, put them back together, and continually put them back together. That's what the bob does. I don't know if that helps you. Jessica, I couldn't answer that question if that was true. Table flip. Aaron, you didn't say the magic word. You don't know the rules of the contest. Everybody else did. Everybody should ask Aaron Johnson how much free stuff that I have given him to try and test because he lives here in Arizona. It's called a DIN cable. That's the actual technical term for it, Brett. But I will show you what it looks like. Okay. Oop, computer, don't fail me now. Right here, this guy. That is your DIN or your bob connection. It's right here. Well, Aaron has helped me a lot. He he built my fish tank equipment rack. He built my fish tank trimming and all the stuff that you've seen on my 100 and my 300. He built. I'm going to be doing a video on my 300 next week. Not a reef tank, it's strictly fish. But I'm gonna do a little short video on it so you guys can see it. Aaron and my wife did that, and it came out really nice. I'll take the hand down, Aaron, when you're done. No, if Aaron's handing down anything, he's giving it back to me. That's what he's doing. So, any questions on any of the modules? Anything we went over? Oh goodness. Anything else anybody needs to know? Now's the time. If you have entered the contest, I'm going to look and see if everybody that entered the contest asked a question regarding reef automation. If you did not, unfortunately, I can't have you in the contest. Just like Aaron is not going to be in the contest because he didn't say the magic word like everybody else did and didn't read the rules. So, anyway, Let's get some of these things out of here. So we got about 15 people in today, so that's pretty good. And it looks like we got about 11 people that entered the contest. So if you guys weren't here last week, a bunch of people entered the contest and then they left. So you got to stay till the end. I'm trying to get these streams to be an hour, but we've already went about an hour now. So I'm gonna go over probes now. Not gonna do a lot with them, but I'm just gonna go over them and some best practices for each of them because I know a lot of people have asked about this. Oh, there you go, Aaron. Can you automate the PMOne calcium reactor with the Apex? I have the original with the PMOre. If you want to go over it, you can go over alerts on difference between email alerts and actual module alerts. Okay, so a couple questions here. There is no reason to automate the ACR that Bill makes. It is automated by itself. So, Producer Reef, you plug it in, and that's it. There's nothing more to it. You can automate whether or not the device turns off and on. So, for instance, if you have a Trident, you can automate if it goes above a certain amount, turn off the calcium reactor. That's about the automated that you would do with it. I haven't done anything with it other than just plug it in, and just it keeps it stable. Go over alerts on the difference between email alerts and actual module alerts. I think I know what you're saying, Brian, but I'm gonna show that real quick. So, as we talked about last week, we have an email and an alarm alert that you can program whatever you want. For instance, I have my temperatures and salinities and so forth in here. But also with the newer Apex, you can actually go to the salinity here and you can actually program. Oh, I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong button. You can go and click on the gear here on the newer Apex. You can't do this on the classics, and you can have an alert right here. So to answer Brian's question, this alert right here will override any other email alerts. So it's redundant to put this into the email alert as well as the alerts here, because this is going to alert you regardless. So the question really is, which one do you use? I use this one because it's easier and I can adjust it real quick on the fly. But if you notice, if I go to my email alert, I do not have them here. You see that? Now I do have them in my alarm alert because my alarm alert is the sound that comes from the display unit. So I believe that having them in here is extremely important. I don't have an answer to that question. I think, honestly, it's whatever's easier for you to program. But remember that anytime you program something in the gear, or anytime you program it in this area, this will override whatever alert's going on in your actual email alert. So for instance, if there was a leak and your pH was higher than a certain amount, you're going to get the pH alert before you're going to get the leak alert. So it's kind of hard to say which one's more important and should you use both. I would recommend using one or the other, and that's kind of what I do here. You notice I don't have my pH in here or my salinity in here. I don't have it on both. XML ORP. Okay, so ORP probe. The ORP probe is extremely useful for multiple different reasons. I would say the ORP tells you if you've overfed. It tells you if you have some form of a toxic metal in the tank. For most people, they use ORP for ozone. I use my ORP probe for ozone because I do dump ozone. But the ORP can tell you a number of other things. If you were to overfeed, for instance, the ORP will just skyrocket down. If you were to have something in there that's real bad, the ORP will go down. So is it useful, Jessica? I would say it's more useful for ozone, but it can indicate other things that could be happening. Um, how you can program a pump to do ramp ups, pulsing, and ramp downs. So, Aaron, we did that last week in profiles. So on last week's stream, I went over that. Um, what about the bob to fill your ATO with a couple float switches or some kind of solenoid? Okay, so float switches, again, are a contact closure, Corwin. So you can use the bob for the float switches. If you cut the wire, you can just tie the wire into a float switch, and then you can tell it where you want it to go. Solenoids typically need power, so you can't use a bob for power. The bob is strictly a contact closure. Um, so again, solenoid power, bob to get the connection that you need. Right, a leak center probe goes out. Calibration. So what's the best? We're gonna go over that in a second. Yes, the Classic has built-in audible alarms if you use a display. And unfortunately, I keep bugging Neptune about making some type of wireless display because I want to be able to hear my alarm when I'm sleeping, and I don't want to use it. I don't want to run a USB all the way to my bedroom. So you have to have a display to get the audible alarms. How do I top off my A2 at the tank at a solenoid for a day of float? Makes sense so it doesn't overflow. How I top? Oh, okay. My class is it has built-in screen. I like the email alert list. You need to modify the things for these. Float versus what is the number range as far as safe level for float versus optical level sensor, Mr. Devin from Reef Dudes? We've talked about this a few times. I like optical sensors. I think they're a little more robust than a float switch. In my experience, I've seen float switches fail a lot more than I've seen optical sensors. As long as you put the optical sensor in a location in the sump that doesn't have dosing, that doesn't have any type of additional water going in there, as long as you have your floats or your optical sensor in a location where it doesn't get kalkwasser, doesn't get calcification, any type of buildup on it, they work fantastic. I have tons of optical sensors. Let's see. The solenoids, Corwin, I would say go to that auto top-off company. They make so many different ones. You can cut the wires. You can make them work however you want. So this guy's got tons of solenoids here. Safe for ORP. Generally, you want your ORP to not surpass 450. A good ORP in a normal tank is between about 250 and 350-ish. You will notice that if you have a higher ORP, your tank will be much clearer, and it will look a lot cleaner when you have a higher ORP. As for safe level of ORP, if you're using ozone, generally you can get up to 450. If you're not using ozone, not many tanks will surpass even 350 without ozone. It's almost impossible. The general rule of thumb for ozone is going to be between 350 and 400 safely. I know a lot of people that run ozone between 250 and 300. It's a personal preference. I would recommend not getting past 450 though. 450, I've seen ill effects on corals at 450 plus. Mr. Aaron Johnson, do you have a question for me? If you want to be entered in the contest, you have to ask an automation question. And I want to just give you crap because you were giving me crap earlier. So, probes, pH. pH probes, for those that don't know, do go bad. They do go bad generally at about a year and a half. I've seen probes go bad at about a year. You will know when a probe goes bad when it comes to pH when it doesn't change. I've had people argue with me on this quite a bit. A bad pH probe is not a pH probe that swings. A good pH probe is a probe that swings. A bad pH probe is one that stays. So for instance, if your pH is 8.0 and it always is 8.0, you have a bad probe. Almost everyone's fish tank will decrease and increase pH throughout the day. Every reef tank, always. Whether or not that swing is less or more depends on your dosing habits, depends on if you're using a refugium, if you're using things that will raise pH. You're always going to have the pH drop during the evening. It's just unless you're not knowing what you're doing and you're having your lights on 24/7, your pH is always going to swing. Typically, most people's pH swings about a 0.1. I've seen pH swings 0.2, 0.3. But again, you will know when your pH probe is bad when it stays stagnant or it stays at 8.0 or barely moves. That's how you know when a pH probe is bad. You can try to recalibrate it at the point of time when it does that, but generally, most of the time, it is a bad probe and it needs to be replaced. So, Timothy, I think I answered that. Year and a half, generally. Me, since I have a number of pH probes sitting in my garage just for in case they go bad, I replace them when they go bad. I don't replace them at a year and a half. Once I see the pH kind of just chilling there and not moving, that's when I know it's time to change them. Aaron, I'm not going to answer that question. ORP is 315. Rogue, that's a good number. If you're using ozone, like I said, a good number, I believe, is like 350-ish. 315 is a very good number. That means your tank doesn't have a lot of bad stuff in it. Let's see. What other questions we have? Okay, so we'll go to the next one, which is ORP, which we're kind of talking about ORP. ORP is different. So generally an ORP probe will drift to ridiculous numbers when it's bad. Generally ORP, like I said, should stay at a pretty close number throughout the day. There's a couple fluctuations. The way ORP typically works is as pH goes up, ORP goes down. So as your pH is going up during the day, your ORP is going to go down, and then vice versa. So if you start to see your ORP going to 550 or 600, for instance, more than likely it's a bad probe. So I generally recommend replacing ORP probes, when they go bad. I mean, ORP probes aren't that important for the system, so I would say, yeah, when you start to see them veer off into ridiculous numbers, that's when it's time to replace them. Shelf life of a pH probe. That's a good question. I would say a shelf life of a pH probe is maybe a year, but again, I have pH probes sitting in my garage I've had for 2 years. I plug them in and they work just fine. So it really just depends. When you plug them in, you calibrate them. If they're having issues, you'll know right away. Do I have a place to get a cheaper pH when they go bad? Johnny, I have BRS ones. They're pretty cheap, so I would say BRS. Calibrate your pH probe once. You should not be multiply calibrating your pH probe. If you're having to calibrate your pH probe, then the pH probe is probably bad. I don't recommend calibrating it more than one time. If it's going into a new tank and it's been out of the water for like an hour, I might recalibrate it. But generally, you only calibrate it once. I think that the pH probes themselves should not lose calibration. Let's see, I don't have a pH probe right now. Yeah, Aaron, you're not getting one. Double junction make a big difference over single. BRS did a video on double junction over single junction, and I am noticing from my own experience that double junctions last longer than the single. I don't think there's a big difference between them other than longevity, um, at least from my experience. Um, so again, ORP probes don't need calibration generally, at least in the Apex world. What I do is I bought the 400 packets of the ORP so I can test if the ORP is working properly, but you do not calibrate them. Um, so let me see if I can find those. Pinpoint makes them. You just want to search for pinpoint ORP calibration solution. This is what it looks like. So you'll use this not to calibrate when it comes to Apex. You will use this to know if your ORP probe is working properly. So you pop this into there. If it's reading 400, then you know you got a good ORP probe. Pretty simple. And I have a couple of these just laying around. If I think my ORP probe is going bad, I just pop it in here. If it says 400, then I know I'm good. Aaron, you got to give me a better question. These questions that you're asking are are not automation related, other than the Crestron one, which no one here knows what that is. So I'm only pooping on you because you pooped on me first. What's your favorite calibration solution for free? Why not calibrate if Neptune has the option? If you read, interestingly enough, if you read on Neptune's forums and so forth, they say to never calibrate their ORP probes. If you need to calibrate your probes, you will need to buy a special kit, and I will show you where it is if you guys want to see it. So ORP calibration kit. Let's see if we can look it up. I think they sell it on Amazon, and that's the wrong. There it is. This is the ORP calibration solution kit for $82. So if you want to calibrate it, you can. I've never had to. Like I said, I pop the 400. I pop it in the 400, and it's always 400, so I don't have to calibrate it. But if you want to, this is the kit you need to calibrate the Neptune right here. Let's see when I calibrate it, but if I know how to do it all. Yeah, you know how to do everything. Aaron, get pooped on because you're smart. That's true. What makes your favorite calibration solution? I would say I use all the Neptune pH calibration solution. I've had pinpoint calibration solution not be accurate, so I would stick with the Neptune one only because they're made for their probes. So Timothy, I don't know really. The pinpoint, I've had some bad ones before. I don't ever recommend, by the way, getting a bottle of calibration. So this guy, I always recommend getting the satchels or the little pouches because those generally are going to be your most accurate. These tend to not be as accurate. These pH solution units. This is getting weird. All right. Let's see. Salinity is the next one. So salinity we could talk about all day. I have about 10 to 15 minutes more, and then I got to get going. But the salinity probe is a heated conversation on all forums, and many people have problems with them, including myself. So here's the trick to salinity probes. You have to use, if you're using the salinity probe from Neptune, you have to use the salinity calibration that Neptune sells. You cannot use any other salinity probe calibration patches or satchels or pouches. It will not work. No matter what anyone says, it will not calibrate properly. So you must use the one that Neptune sells. The key to calibrating the salinity probes is to make sure that they are completely dry when you first start. They only need to be dry for a minute. Don't listen to all these people on there that say they need to be dry for 24 hours. That's a bunch of BS. Making sure it's dry, maybe a minute. Wipe it off with a cloth. Um, do the calibration, and once the calibration is complete, my recommendation with all salinity probes is to put them in the least turbulent area of the tank. So I put a salinity probe in one of my tanks right around where the return is. Um, so all the water that's getting near the return pump is getting sucked into the return. So I put it literally right to the right of that. So there's almost no bubbles, there's no turbulence, and it works very well right there. So make sure if you're using a salinity probe, you put it in the least turbulent area of the tank. The salinity probes will not work properly, and you will have all kinds of problems with them if you put them anywhere near dosing pumps, bubbling, near baffles, anything that they recommend putting it. Make sure there's no micro bubbles, not near the skimmer, not near anything that has bubbles, the most least turbulent as possible. I will tell you that I have found a lot of success, surprisingly, putting them in overflow boxes. And the reason is because the overflow boxes are generally very calm um, near the top. So if you put the salinity probe kind of near the top of your overflow, you get very little microbubbles. You get very little turbulence there. And I have found that to be an okay spot. I put my salinity probe in my Nano here, literally right before the baffle goes over. So it's right where the baffle goes over, and it's a very good spot. Um, so Brian, your question has been asked and answered multiple times in multiple forms, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that if you put the salinity probe upside down, you must calibrate it upside down, and that's the hardest part. Um, So if you put the probe upside down, it's supposed to actually work pretty well and much better in turbulent areas. But I've noticed if you guys have a salinity probe at home, flip it over and see what happens. It's probably not going to work very well because it has to be calibrated upside down also, which is, as I'm sure you can realize, very difficult to do. So just keep that in mind. Um, My recommendation for the salinity probe also is to recalibrate it every 6 months. So that's another thing. pH probes you should never have to touch. Salinity probes, I would recalibrate them. So just letting you know on that. To answer Devin's question, if you have a salinity probe there, go ahead and flip it upside down and see what the salinity says. You will find that it says double what the salinity is because it's not calibrated for being upside down. If you do calibrate it upside down, which I have done, it works really well. But I have found no problems with the salinity probe if it's in very less turbulent areas. And I can show you right here from my example of my salinity how stable my salinity is from where I put it. And I think putting it right next to the return pump is the best place for it. So as you can see, it's pretty stable. I mean, it doesn't really fluctuate too much. So calibrating your salinity, can you just set it in some calibration and see if it's reading? Yeah, Brian, you can do that, but don't calibrate it with that solution. You can use that to make sure your salinity probe is working, but don't calibrate it with it. You have to use the Neptune. Isn't it just 2 electrodes? I don't really know what's in that salinity probe, but I know that there's these 2 little uh, holes in the side, and those things when they get any type of air in them, the salinity just drops down. You'll know when your salinity probe is acting weird or when there's bubbles in the salinity probe if the salinity goes down. And generally, if that happens, you just have to shake the salinity probe and it'll go back to normal. Try to not get any bubbles in there as best as you can. And again, I have another salinity probe in my other tank, and you can see how stable this one is. I mean, You can't get it much more stable than that. Again, I don't think I have a picture of it, but my salinity probe is literally sitting right next to my return pump on the opposite side of my baffle. So there's no turbulence whatsoever. If it's not reading correct, it's either bad or not calibrated properly. So I can tell you that they're very finicky. If you're relying on like a refractometer, for instance, then I would kind of just ignore the refractometer and go with the Apex. And I only say that because I've sent my water into ICP multiple times, and my salinity is pretty much exactly the same as ICP says. I think that's it for probes. I mean, Neptune makes a temperature probe. Temperature probe, just stick it in. There's really not much more to it. Just stick it in anywhere in the tank. They work really well. I've never had any issues with them. I calibrate those as well by using another one. Let's see. All right. So I think that's about it. We've been on for about an hour and a half, and I have to get going. Does anybody have any questions at all right now? I will tell you that there are a couple people that are in here that haven't asked a question and haven't said the magic word to be part of the contest. So if you want to be part of the contest, you need to do both of those things. So we're going to move over to our contest. Hopefully everybody that was in here is still here, unlike last week. So if you don't see your name here, shout it out. There's a reason why your name's not on here, because you didn't follow the rules. So if you don't see your name, please let me know, and I will put it on there. Is it better to ramp lights or just on or off? That's a good question. I would have to say, Aaron, that it is better to ramp lights because that's what happens in nature. Corals generally don't like to just get a blast of light all of a sudden. So I would say it's better to ramp them. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if anybody else in the channel agrees with me, but I think ramping them is the best way to do it. All right. Let's put Reef Dudes in here. I think you asked a couple questions, so I'll give you. So, Aaron, I'm sure you know I have a T5 hybrid also. What I do is I ramp my LEDs and then I turn the T5s on. So I have the LEDs ramping up to the T5s. So that's how I would do that for you. In your case, I'll do the same thing. Yeah, Aaron, you're missing because you didn't ask a question. And I like to mess with you a little bit. All your questions were just to piss me off, I think. But that last question was pretty good. So there you go. Well, Aaron, if you don't have LEDs, then T5s have been a staple for a long time, and people have just turned them on without any problems. I would suggest, Aaron, that you get some form of an LED, even moonlights, something to allow the ramping up to your T5s. That's what I would do. So, all right. Now, last week we had people missing after this, so let's see what happens this week. Anybody have any questions before we go? Because I got to get going, and we're going to do this. Again, if you guys didn't see it, I'm going to show you again. We have a Tunze Osmolator Nano, and we have 2 flipper magnets I'm giving away. They are both. Everything's used, by the way. Nothing, you know, giving away free stuff. Not always going to be brand new. Got any spares? All right. And I think everybody's on here. If you're not on here, let me know. And hopefully, last week we had an issue with the pop-up blocker, so we're gonna disable this thing. Don't run. Okay. So everybody should be on here. And here we go. The winner today is Carl. So, Carl, if you are still here, say hello. Hopefully you're still here. I know this was a long stream, guys. I'm losing my voice already. Uh, so, Carl, you have a minute to say you are here. We had this happen last week. And Vinny, it is a prize for every. All three are going to one person. I'm not doing three separate ones. Producer, I appreciate it, but yeah, I'm sweating, I'm dying, I'm losing my voice. All right, Carl. I hate doing this to these guys, but unfortunately, if you're not here, I have to redo it, and I feel bad, but it's just unfortunate. Again, you got to stay the entire stream. I know this was a long one, so I appreciate everybody that stayed this time. All right, here we go again. Vinny, I know you're here. If Vinny is here, say hello in the chat, please. There he is. Okay, so Vinny, you need to go on Facebook and private message me, and we'll get this thing shipped out to you. Yeah, 3 items for you today. Look at that. So for everybody that stayed, I really appreciate it. I really do. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you tell your friends, all that fun stuff. Make sure you like the channel. I'm going to start putting some more content, as much as I can. And next week's going to be another giveaway, and it could be big, it could be small, it could be 3, 4, 5 items. I have a box of stuff to give away. So thank you again for everybody that came, and I really appreciate again the support that everyone's given me. And if anybody has any questions at all, you can always go on our Facebook channel, which is in the link below in our comments. And if you ever just need help programming, I'm always around. You can PM me on Facebook or message me, and I'll help you with programming. So anyway, everyone have a wonderful weekend, and hope to see you all next weekend. Thank you.